We talk a lot in recovery about character defects, but we can talk about that in recovery from anything. It doesn't have to be just drugs and alcohol. I am recognizing that the people that come into this space are often seeking life recovery. It's not even necessarily a drugs or alcohol issue. It's a life issue. We're trying to navigate life, and for the ones sitting here in this space today, we have chosen God to be the one that we follow. And I started thinking about sin and what that actually is. So we're going to talk about that today from perhaps a little bit of a different perspective, because what it really is spiritual warfare. And I don't think we see it that way very often. Let's get into that a bit. And I encourage you, if you have questions or something to contribute, you know you're always free to. We will always stop and talk about it. The verse we're taking this from today is John 8:44. It says, he was a killer from the very start. He couldn't stand the truth because there wasn't a shred of truth in him. When the liar speaks, he makes it up out of his own nationality and nature. He is the father of lies. When we sit and read this, something struck me. I looked at this. He makes it up out of his nationality. Well, what would you say your nationality is? I would say, well, I'm a German American living in America. I'm American. That's my nation. That's my country. I'm American. So what is his nationality? It's lies and deceits and deception. That's actually, it's where he comes from. That's what everything is, where he comes from. There is nothing that isn't that where he comes from. Everything he does and says is deceit and lies and deception because he's out to take us down. That's what it actually is. Like the spirit of lies, the spirit of deceptions is far more than just a moral failure or a shortcoming or a weakness you have. Do we stop to think about what it really is? It's darkness. The Spirit of God dwells in us. We often forget the spirit of darkness does the same if we allow it. And that's what we want to talk about today. Deception takes many, many, many different forms in this world. And some of it actually comes really wrapped up in a package that looks so appealing and so close to the truth that many believe it is truth. It looks so good. It sounds so good. There's just this little thing that seems a little, but everything, like 99% of it, that sounds so good. And unfortunately, I see that most often in church. You know, in those buildings that call themselves church, because where better for the spirit and demon of deception to go than inside the walls of a space that calls itself church. Oh, looks like I got powdered sugar on my pants. Fear, heaviness, and perversion. These all come from the father of lies. It comes from Satan. It comes from the pit of hell. It comes from the nation of deception, where that's the only language spoken but fear. We sang that song that it's a liar, and we go through life just afraid of everything. We're afraid of the past. We're afraid of now. We're afraid of the future. We're afraid of what could happen. Well, it could, it might, it's possible. And the thing is, the deceiver shows us that all the time. Turn on the news. And what do we see? Horrible things can happen. Or, unfortunately, we've experienced horrible things that came right to our doorstep. So what does that do? It leaves this huge spirit of fear. Well, look at that. Look at this happens. This happens, so it leaves you paralyzed in fear. Because, you know, it's going to happen again. What if, what if, what if? And fear is just paralyzing. Because if you don't address that in the right way, we can move on into the heaviness. Think of the other word for heaviness is depression. The retreat and isolation, because what happens when you live life out of a place of fear? That voice talking up here, you start to isolate. And then you start to maybe linger in bed longer. And maybe it takes longer to turn the lights on or open the curtains or open the blinds and let the light in. Or maybe you just decide, you know what, I don't want to. And then you don't reach out to people and you don't leave the house and you withdraw further and further into you. And this voice is getting louder and louder and louder and louder. And perversion, so often we can talk about that in the, oh, she's going to talk about sex. Well, no, anything can be a perversion. Work can become a perversion. A hobby can become a perversion. How about drug use? How about drinking? How about, there's so many things that aren't a problem until they are. We can take things that are good and pervert them. The Bible is often perverted. And it goes from the greatest love story ever told to one of the worst weapons people use against other individuals. That's a perversion of the Bible. The Bible was never meant to be used to club you upside the head, to condemn you and tell you how horrible and worthless you are, but how many of us have had it used that way? I have. Point out this verse and then point out that verse and then here's another one. Well, anybody can cherry pick verses and make them say what you want them to say. But even the Bible versions themselves become perverted over the course of time, because as I'm finding, if you go all the way to the very beginning where they're taken from, I kind of wonder, how does it sound like this? Because when I go to research the original, there's been changes. And that happens because humanity gets involved. Because the father of lies was involved. We need to be so careful. I'm going to go there right now. We have so many people that hold out the King James Version as the holy grail of the best Bible ever. And it's almost become an idol. That reading in this high King's language with the these and the thous and reading things you struggle to comprehend for some reason, that's the epitome and the best of the best. And yet I look at that and you research the history of it, and it was a political move by a king who decided what would stay and what wouldn't stay. Well, I have some questions. Why did you lap off what you lapped off? Why did you exclude what you excluded? And can you help me understand that? And then move before that. And then go before that, because why wouldn't we still want to reference the same things that Jesus and his disciples read and cited in the New Testament? And yet, King James said it can't be part of the Bible. And I'm wrestling with that right now, because I'm reading all the other stuff and I'm actually finding my soul gets excited when I read it, because it's answering questions and it makes things so much clearer and it doesn't contradict what's in the King James. So why was it excluded? For the right reasons or father of lies? And it's okay to ask those questions. We've just been made afraid to question it if a church has said something. But it's the most important for church to be the one questioning, because isn't the father of lies going to most actively target people who attend church or call themselves the church? Why is he going to go after the ones he already has? And we just sit and go through life so often thinking I'm immune from any danger from this. And we start to look at our sins of lying or gossiping or slandering or any of the other things as a weakness on my part. I failed. Hi, cute girl. It just makes my day every time I see that cute smiling face. we start talking about this in the sense that I failed or I did this, and I would like us to maybe start rethinking that. It sounds a little different to say, I was gossiping about somebody last week. I had the spirit of darkness in me, and it was using me to speak words that aren't of God. What sounds more serious than just saying I gossiped last week? I would rather say I gossiped, because that sounds nicer, doesn't it? Than to say what really happened. The spirit of darkness was in me and spoke words of gossip using my mouth. Me. The person who has also the spirit in me allowed room for the spirit of gossip. Me. And I don't believe I'm the only one. Every lie, every fib, every time we gossip, every time we deceive, every time we try to make ourselves sound better, that's just one of those little sins that don't count. Yeah, it does count because of where it comes from. That's why we don't do the bigger sins and the little sins, because every sin isn't just a failure on your part. It's the work of a spirit of darkness. That's what it really is. We get that voice in our head as we try to get through life, and we're trying to walk out our life the way that we're called to, and I don't know, something really bad is going to happen if I just step out fully in faith and belief and trust, so I'm just going to stay here and hold on to my stuff. I'm going to hang on to my trauma, and I'm going to hang on to my fear, and I'm going to hang on to my anxiety, and I'm going to hang on to my pride and my ego, because that's what that is. And I hate saying that because it convicts me deeply, because I hang on to those things. My ego sure gets in the way a lot, in ways that the father of lies convinces us isn't ego. That lie, something bad's about to happen and you can't stop it. That's an example of something that is wrapped up in a way that almost sounds true. There are certain things like we could not stop, but can God? And who lives in us? If God lives in us, then how can we say this? The truth is, in 2 Timothy, we are given power. We are given love, but we are given a sound mind. And what that means is we can work things out. Our sound mind means it doesn't have to be controlled by the father of lies. What it means is we have the ability with the Spirit to work our way through that, and we are called to do that. Because do we want to be filled with the spirit of darkness? I don't. Because the spirit of darkness are all the things that are opposite of what God is. We talk about the love all the time, but what about joy and peace? Are those present in your life all the time? Because being filled with the Spirit and removing the ones of darkness means it should be. That's why the fruit of the Spirit should be evident. People living a Spirit-filled life will show the fruit of the Spirit. It's too late to change. It's just the way it's going to be. If you don't think I struggled with that at 50 years old when all of a sudden I'm realizing, shoot, plan A is off the table and I have to figure out how to re-engage with living life and move forward. Well, guess what? I don't have anything left because I'd given everything away and my money was gone and I had no plans for a future. So now what? I could either listen to the old lies of you have nothing to offer. It's too late. You're 50 years old. You're 1 foot in the grave. It's too late. How are you going to ever? There was war in me dealing with this. How many of us struggle with that? It's just too late. It's always been like this. It's always going to stay this way. If you knew what I've been through, it's just how it's going to be. It's the spirit of darkness. It's the father of lies, because the truth is, in Isaiah, it says, trade that heavy spirit for a praise garment, because it was described as in a heavy, wet wool blanket just thrown over your spirit. It's dark and it's heavy and it's gloomy and it's dreary and it seems impossibly heavy and it will never get better. And God's like, no, take it off and put my garment on. And why don't we? Why are we afraid to do that? Why are we afraid to live joyfully and praise-filled? Why do we choose instead to keep that heavy, wet, wool, dripping blanket on us? What makes us choose that? I know that I have. Because after a while, even that starts to feel comfortable, because, we've done that for a long time. I've sat feeling like this for a long time, and I know how to do this. And guess who we've got right in here going, that's right, you do. Everything you've been through, people were awful to you, you're right. Anybody would feel this way. You have a right to be mad. You have a right to be bitter. You have a right to live your life always like this. And he will continue to show us all the things. But turn around and look at the light. Because the light has covered that. If Jesus took it off, we need to stop fighting him to have it back. Think about fighting for the blanket, And Jesus give it to me. I've paid it. You're paying for something you don't have to. I have so repeatedly gone to pick up the very thing that my ego says, I'm going to tell people, I'm going to leave it right here. And they're going to look at me and think, oh, that's wonderful. She's leaving her shame here. But what they didn't know is I kept a pocket full to come home because, apparently I was that good at living a life that was shameful that Jesus couldn't quite cover the pocket full. I need to hang on. No, that's my ego. That is my ego, and it's an insult to my Jesus who gave all for me to say I have to hang on to this one and look on it and dwell on it and use it as my reason why I can't move forward. And if that isn't humbling to admit, For those of us, drugs and alcohol, how often have we felt this way? Just one, but just one. Just one to take the edge off. I'm just going to pick up one more shift. I'm just going to fill in the blank with whatever it is that speaks to us that will fill that space. You need this. It's not going to really hurt you. You can control it now. You've done so much work. It's been 2 years, Heidi, since you've had a drink. One glass of wine ain't going to be nothing. It'll be nothing until one glass turned into, those boxes where you don't have to see the level going down. I kind of realized my subconscious understood there's a problem when the girl who didn't like boxed wine went to boxed wine because I didn't like seeing the proof. The big lie. Everything's fine. You don't even have to look at it. Put it in a box you can't see inside of. You don't even have to look at it. So you went with 4 glasses instead of 1. It's okay. No, it isn't okay, because the truth is Romans 1 says, don't trade in the real God for something that's fake. What you really need in those moments isn't a glass of wine, a drug, food, sex, gambling, work, money, whatever it is, technology. You don't need that. That's not what you need in those spaces. What you need to fill that with is God and His guidance. He speaks so loud in here. And what I read that grabbed my attention was something to this effect. Don't treat a bullet like it was a mistake. Because what is it that the spirit of lies is shooting at you? Is he shooting to kill? Lies, gossip. We've been shot. It's a bullet from the father of lies. It wasn't just a little mishap. It wasn't an oops. Worked as a paramedic. There was not one single time I saw a victim of a homicide and said, oh, that was a mishap today. Well, oops. Oops. Never. No, it was murder. It was murder because it was done with intent. It was deliberate. It's no different with the father of lies. It's deliberate and with intent because he wants us to die eternally with him. That's what it really is. And I'm starting to understand that when I just call it gossip, or I told a fib, or I might have fudged on my income taxes, why do I call what it really is something that's a little cuter and kinder? I get it, but at the same time, do we remember what it really is? Because spiritual warfare, I think we forget that it's real. God and Jesus is something we talk about, but not an idea that's really, really, really real. God himself said, I am spirit, and you must worship me in spirit and in truth. That means we have to have an understanding that the spiritual aspect to God is so real. That's where the war is going on now. The war that Jesus fought and won. Do you think the angels are just up there sitting on a star looking all super cute like little cherubs and singing these songs? No. Why do you think people had fear when they showed up? What do you think they look like? I mean, this is a war. This is all-out war. Because darkness isn't just going, well, we lost. I guess we'll just hang out here until it's done. No, they have one last chance to take what they can get. And God isn't there saying, can't do that, they're all mine. No, he's like, they get to choose. I covered it all. But they get to choose. And part of me really wishes, like, God, could you have just made everybody just choose you? Because I would prefer that. It'd make life a lot easier and better. We wouldn't have to watch people go to hell. Because I'm starting to recognize that when they talk about the narrow way that following Jesus is, it really is narrow. In a very different way than I used to believe and realize. God isn't an anything goes God. He didn't say, I died for everything, so do whatever you want to and it's going to be just fine. No, he has expectations. You know, he sacrificed his son. So when we choose lies, gossip, slander, depression, anxiety, fear, all those other things that come from the spirit of darkness, I'm starting to recognize what an insult to God that actually is. I am bought and paid for by Him. I am fully His, and I make room for the spirit of darkness. It's like there's an intruder in my house, and instead of kicking it out, we kind of like try to come to an arrangement with the intruder. Who would do that? You wake up in the middle of the night, you got an intruder in your house, and let's just come to an agreement how this is going to work here. So I'll allow you to be in this part of my house to do whatever you want, but the rest is mine. Is that what we would do? Like, really? So if we belong fully to God, why did we open the door and let the darkness in? Here, let me open the window. It looks like you're really struggling to get in. So this window's big enough for you. Here, hand me your bag and your gun and your knife and your rope and all this stuff. Here, hand that to me. I'll take it. Here, let me help you in. You hungry? You want something to eat? And yeah, it's kind of funny to think about it that way, but the reality is that's what we do. By allowing that spirit of darkness to stay in us. I have been so deeply convicted. Lies, gossip, slander, little white lies, the fib, the embellishment. And I think we often don't realize how often human beings turn to those things because our desire is always to show ourselves in such a good light. Not sure why I got this little corner thing down there, but that's okay. The voice. That's the spirit of darkness. It's the spirit of fear when you hear, but I'm going to fail. I don't know how to do this. I'll just fail. I've always failed. But that lion, the roar, the spirit, I have a sound mind. I can do this. With God's help, with the tools He has given me, I can navigate this hard path. I'm not going to listen to this. I am not going to fail because God is with me. This is too heavy for me to carry. I can't get through this. God, you know everything I've been through, and I can't. It's the spirit of depression. The roar says, trade this in for a garment of praise. Jesus has paid for this. The Lion of Judah covered this for me. I don't have anything heavy on me because He took it for me. The spirit of perversion. Just one drink isn't going to hurt you. Look at that. It's a glass of wine. Jesus turned water into wine. A little wine is good for the soul. It says so in the Bible. Well, I took that to heart. Like, if a little wine is good for the soul, gallons must be better. Not really. No, it's not. So God's like, I'm not trading in what is real for something that is fake. One of the biggest spirit of isolation. But you're all alone. Nobody cares. Nobody really cares. Look at you. Look at everything you've done. Who's going to want you, like you, love you? Fill in the blank. All alone. Look at you. Hate that one so much because we are everything but all alone. The master. But even that word, God, stands with me. And we dare say we're all alone? That spirit of depression and what that does. trying to separate us from the one who's right there. All alone. No, I'm not. Don't you tell me that I am alone. Don't you tell me that I'm worthless. Don't you tell me I'm not worthy. This is my dad. You're a fake. He works on me with this one. You're a fake, Heidi. You drank for 40 years. What are you doing up there on Sunday morning? Who do you think you are? 40 years you sat and drank. Look at all these people that did life right, and they did the right thing, and they did good things. You? Do you know what you did when you were drinking for 40 years? Let me remind you. How many of us can have the movie reel of our life just play so easily? Mine always ends with the ending credits of, and here's the faces of all the people you hurt and let down. Because he knows how to get me. You fake. No, I'm not. No, I'm not, because I'm God's. Because Jesus saw my sealed scroll that nobody could open and nobody could cover and nobody could make right the things that I've done. Jesus saw it and says, I can. And he did. He didn't open it and go, oops, not doing that, and sealed that back up, said, Heidi's a lost cause. Dave, I'm not unique. And I'm so grateful that you taught me that lesson right out of the gate when I met you. Because if that doesn't solve that ego thing, that is the liar. Because isn't that all ego? You're gonna fail. It's too heavy. Just one. Heidi, you are all alone. Nobody loves you. Nobody likes you. And what a fake. And when I listened to all those things, guess what I did? Nothing. No moving forward, no serving, no being the hands and feet of God. I just sat with my big old ego saying I'm too big for God. Everything that happened to me is way too much for God. I know he's got everybody else, but I'm a special case, and I'm so deeply grateful. And I always hear it in your voice. I'm not unique. And the comfort in that is immense once you understand. Again, Ecclesiastes and Solomon, there is nothing new under the sun. Every time I think I've been too much and just too everything, read the Bible. David, a man after God's own heart, was a rapist and a murderer. Those are pretty big things. Those are things that if I were guilty of those things, I could sit and say, this is just too much and too big for God, but God would be like, have you read that book? Because I sure love David. It is so incredibly important to remember that these just aren't little things. That it's not things even that it's under our own power and we have caused to have happen. I think it changes things in our mind when we start to realize exactly what the lie is. What fear and heaviness and perversion and isolation, what those things are. It's spirits of darkness. It's spiritual warfare that's happening in us. It's often where it happens. As a follower of Jesus, it's where it should happen because the Spirit should be indwelling in us. What's going to happen when darkness comes into something, when they're both in there? Do you think they coexist beautifully together? You know, it's like, look at, honey, I found this beautiful wolf and here's this super cute little baby goat. Well, how long before the baby goat is like a wolf Happy Meal, you know? Two things like that cannot exist in the same individual. God says you can't serve me and you can't serve the devil at the same time. You cannot. You must choose. It's why we should be left feeling guilt-ridden and unsettled when we choose to lie, cheat, steal, sin. We should feel conviction because that's the war. That's the spiritual warfare. We've been shot, like damage is done. Do you leave it there, unattended? Because I know what will happen. Left unaddressed, it takes over. It's just what darkness does. God's not going to stay where you actively invite evil in. He can't, because it's not his nature. God cannot and will not exist alongside evil. He simply won't. So if we choose to be filled with and not do something about it, he won't stay. And that's not lost on me. The God-born are also the God-protected, and the evil one can't lay a hand on them. We know that we are held firm by God. 1 John 5. But don't waltz through life using that as your excuse to just do whatever and not address what needs to be addressed. God will not stay where you actively welcome evil. So if you're not actively fighting fear, depression, perversion, isolation, if you're not actively fighting the father of lies, he cannot stay because you've allowed the darkness to remain. He'll pull away. Doesn't mean he's gone. You're not going to be filled by the Spirit if the darkness is just allowed to run rampant in your life, to where you excuse your behaviors as it's just really not that big of a deal. Well, I had to lie because of. And man, that gets sticky because there's things in life sometimes where it's like that just seems that will be the remedy. This is where you start to realize how narrow the way is of following Jesus. Are we looking for ways around everything? You know, we talked with somebody and we just got to talking about making amends and that. And if somebody comes to you to make amends and just says, hey, let's just let bygones be bygones, let's just bury the hatchet. No, that's going around something you have to go through. That's not addressing the issue or the problem. That's not saying, hey, this is what I did and this was my part of it and I want to clear that up with you. That whole avoiding it just to get beyond it, no, you left some spirit of darkness in there because there's some ownership that has to happen. For people facing that huge making of amends thing, I'll pray for you, it's hard, but it's the best thing you will ever do. But you have to do it well, and you have to do it right. You can't skirt around the uncomfortable issues. You can't avoid talking about it, like, let's just let that stay in the past and move on. No, your responsibility is to I'm going back to the past, I'm walking through it, and I'm cleaning up my part of it. We can't be go-arounders, because then we haven't removed it. We've just gone around it. A tree falls in the road. What if everybody just starts driving around it? And everybody's going to complain about the tree in the road. Stop driving around it and move it out of the way. Yes, it takes work. You have to get the chainsaws and cut it up and manual labor and physically move and taking the time, but that tree isn't going to pull itself out of there. And that, oh, you're just going to wait for it to rot away? Well, you're not going to be here anymore. We can't take the easy way out just because it's more comfortable. Depression, that gets hard working with people on depression because it's so real. And then we got our infamous Michigan winters, but that gets easy too to use. Is it a real thing? It is. But there's also easy ways to address it. And so often we like to rather look for excuses to hang on to our depression. And this is convicting for me to say these aren't easy because I know a lot of us deal with depression. I do. But we need to call it what it is. And I found that as soon as I called it what it is, I started kind of getting mad that it was in me because I don't want the spirit of darkness in me. Why was I more willing to accept depression then? Because what is that? That's why I like calling things what they actually are. It makes me more eager and willing to remove it from my life when I call it what it is. Depression's not staying in my life because I'm not allowing darkness to stay in my life. I am not going to pick up one glass of wine. I won't. I'm not. I will not. I am not going to look at a glass of wine and say my answer is in that when I know who is the answer. That feeling sorry for ourselves, I have times of that. Oh, poor Heidi. Boo-hoo. People are saying this, and people are talking about this, and that. Heidi, get over it. God didn't give me a spirit to sit and look at that, to hang on to that. That's not God's spirit. God's spirit says, who cares what they say? I don't. Your words aren't going to do nothing to me. You're not going to stop me from doing what I'm called to do. And I will continue to do what I'm called to do on Sunday because why? Because God told me to. Because trust me, we argued about that for a long time. Because I believe that bottom one, I'm a fake. I look in the mirror and I go to war with that. Because there's times I can look in the mirror and it's like, do you know what she did? Who does she think she is to get up here and then God's like, but that's why you are. You know how long it took me to understand that? He calls you to your calling because of what he brought you through. He asks you to do the hard things because I took what was awful and worked it out in a way so you are ready for this. And we're going to let the spirit of darkness take that from us by listening to that? We need to remember this because this is truth. And so often people say, oh, but you know, I have been harmed. Horrible things have happened. Evil has come directly to our family. And Dave, I know that's happened in your family, right to your doorstep. You've seen the worst that humanity can do. And that still means this is true. This is still true. And you're saying, how? How, in some of those worst moments, is this true, that the evil one can't lay a hand on them? Are we saying that this human life is all that there is? Are we saying that even in the worst of situations, God can't be at work and work out His plan? I'm seeing God starting to work even in your situation that your family went through. And I'm humbled and I'm awed. Because, yeah, that was evil. Just evil. And yet I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that God was there. That He was tender in His mercy when He held two individuals and just lavished them with love. Because they're home. We can't live our life thinking that life here on this planet is all there is. This is everything, and we often act as if it is. And that's where the father of lies does his best work. This is it. This life is all you get, and then it's over. And then it gets really easy to be used by him. It's really easy to hear him when we think that this little life here on this planet is everything. It isn't. Our reason for being here, do we forget what that is? Tell people. Tell people what you know is true. So they don't listen to the father of lies. So they don't think this is all there is. So they don't think that it doesn't matter what they do, because it does. It matters eternally, like it matters that much. And if we truly know that, why do we just keep it for ourselves and I'll just live it in my life? This world, there they are. This world is showing us what it's capable of. What do we see on the news? I have never seen such vile awfulness. Just so out there for all to see. The worst of things that you can imagine, and yet when I go back and read in the Old Testament, people sacrificed their children to idols then. They killed their babies. They offered their children as sacrifices. They did horrible things to children. They did horrible things to individuals and people, and we get so shocked and overwhelmed by what's going on in this world, and yet nothing new under the sun. And I start wondering, God, how in the world are you so patient with us? Human beings that will sacrifice their children in every way imaginable. Hatred and wars and destruction and lies and depression and anxiety and addictions. When you start to realize and truly understand that the battle is spiritual in nature, you will see that the earth is getting darker and darker. Think of it in a light and dark. Who carries the light in this world? God's church. Where are they? You see spots of it. But we're called to be more than just this tiny little thing. We are called to shine everywhere we go, to speak of Him everywhere we go. And you don't do that through preaching at people. You do it through serving them and loving them, through being kind and loving and good and patient, by being fruit of the Spirit. Because it's not lost on me. You don't even have to believe in God to know that if everybody lived their life with love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and goodness and gentleness and in self-control, what would this world look like? Would there be wars? Would children suffer? Would people prey on people? Would people be abused and harmed? Would we have anxiety and depression? Would we have trauma? We would have none of this if the church would be church everywhere they went. But it's here, and it's all around us. And we don't fight it by becoming like them. I don't know how much worse we're going to watch this become, but I know that it will. I know that there's far worse that's happened and happening, and we are not aware of it because we're not told everything. We're manipulated and steered every time we turn around, and the only truth in this world is what comes from God. Because there is a war for our minds at every level, and at the core of it is Satan, the father of lies himself. But don't go through this life thinking it's just Satan out there that we're against. You know that Satan fell with a third of the angels that were in heaven. A third fell with him. We aren't just in war with one individual named Satan. I started thinking about that because we always talk about Satan. Satan, Satan. Like he's it, and he's not. There's so many. And they're on this earth. That's where they were cast. When they fell, they lost the privileges of being in heaven with God. They are on the earth. They were given the earth to roam. Some are freely roaming and others are being held until they release. You either believe this or you don't, but this is reality. What God binds is bound until he says they're loosed, and the time will come when he will loose them fully, and we're talking the worst of the worst. Because the majority of the fallen aren't kept in confinement, they're actively working. They can look like you and me, and they work their best work inside church buildings because they're going after the ones that say they belong to God. So we do have a target on our back. Why would we not? We as followers of Jesus cannot live our life filled with fear and anxiety and depression. We cannot, because then we cannot tell people about him. All 40 years of my drinking, many times I'd always told people that I've always believed in God. I never lost my belief in God. I never lost my faith in God. But what about my life made anybody want to know about my God? Nothing. I was depressed and lonely and anxiety-ridden, full of fear, and ready to end my life. Yeah, everybody wants that, right? Looks good. Sign me up. I want to live a life just like that because it's wonderful living depressed and defeated. Spiritual warfare. I'm going to work really hard to remind myself in my failures and shortcomings that they're not simply failures and shortcomings. I just told a little white lie. No, I allowed the devil to come right through the door that I opened. Come on in. Use me. I got a mouth. Say what you want to say. Destroy people with it. It was gutting to suddenly realize, like, the bullets, he uses my own mouth to shoot them. He uses me to kill people. Their character, their name, through lies, vindictiveness, bitterness. That was me that shot the bullet. Because the father of lies used me to do it, and I allowed it. And it makes me want to take this far more seriously. It makes me want to more show the fruit of the Spirit, because I don't want anybody to look at me and see the father of darkness. Why is it so easy to lie or gossip? God repeatedly goes and talks about how much lying is one of the most hated things in his eyes. Lying. Lies and deception. I'm like, oh, because that was the downfall of everything. With Eve, it started with a lie. I just want to challenge you to maybe think of it from this different perspective and seeing it for what it's really worth. You have God and you have the Spirit in you. And with that knowledge, you should fully understand that that spirit of darkness that is causing all those things to be in your mind and causing you to feel all these things, it's in your control to remove them. I think for a while, and I felt really silly doing this, but I started walking around my house, and almost daily I will walk through my house saying, in the name of Jesus, nothing of darkness can stay in my home, and you must leave. You must leave my home. You must leave the property. You must leave my family. And you cannot return in Jesus' name, because the Bible says, if you tell them to leave in my name, they must leave. So I started doing it, feeling like a fool, like if anybody's watching me, they're going to be laughing at me. I look pretty silly, talking to the air here. Probably does look funny to somebody watching, but I haven't stopped doing that. I don't feel funny anymore doing it because my enemy's very real. I often forget. My husband might get an alert that there was camera motion on there because I forget. As I walk around this building or through this building, deliberately and out loud saying, if you are of darkness in the name of God, you cannot stay in this space. And we can say the same thing about ourselves, in our mind and within us. In the name of Jesus, because Jesus beat the father of lies. Jesus won that fight. So I'm challenging you, claim your home. Claim the spaces you go to. Claim your family and claim yourself for Jesus. And only Jesus. Leave space in there for only the Spirit. And my most favorite thing, tell that spirit of darkness to go to hell, because it's where it comes from. Go back to the land you came from, the land of lies and deceit, the land of hell, the land of darkness. Go back to where you came from in the name of God. You sweet thing. The evil one, He can't lay a hand on you when you belong to God. They can take my life, and guess what? They didn't lay a hand on me because I know right where I'm going to be. Held firmly by my Father God. Amen. I don't know if this changed it for anybody else, just the knowledge of what sin is, that it's just not this little oops. But it's a spiritual battle and a spiritual war, but it's a war that's already been won. Okay. Sing one more song and a prayer, and everybody can eat real good today. There's a lot of food to eat. So we have chicken pot pie or we have quiche. Yeah, we're hauling up my song. Yes.